Lyndsay, how do you say your last name?
Magid.
Magid. Okay.
It's Aviner though. So
So Josh Aviner and Lyndsay Magid, my first guests on Hupdate video interview. Woohoo! So, first thing I want to ask you is, did Hideaway podcasts, or did Hideaway, the company, start as a production company or as a podcast?
Do you want to take that?
sure. Hideaway started first as a production company, and we were in the midst of creating Slumber, and kind of wanted to do something that we could do right now, like in the moment, that was creative, and we could talk to people that we wanted to talk to. So we were like, why don't we do a podcast? So Hideaway started about maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, while we were at school. For grad school, we went to Columbia, and that's where we met, and we started the company there. And then in the meantime, we were like, let's do a podcast. So Hideaway came first on the podcast.
So you started 2 years ago with Hideaway. How did you get the idea to start a production company?
Well, originally we had started work on a show called Firefly Field, which was is still a tented show that we have in development. So we had been working on that while we were both in grad school. And then after a number of factors, including just the difficulty of getting a tented show off of the ground, we decided to switch focus and try to get a theater show up while we continued to finance and sort of figure out how we could make, our tented shows happen. And back in February, we booked the House of Yes for Slumber, which is opening in October. And we're like, oh man, we got all these months to kill. In the meantime, we have to be creating something. And that's sort of where the podcast came from. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess the idea for starting a production company was Josh and I have both previously worked for different theater companies or circus companies. And the idea of creating an entity that we could produce what we believed in and really wanted to put our creative juices into was really appealing to both of us. So we were like, why don't we just do our own company and do the work that we love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, we had a class at Columbia that was called Launching New Ventures, which was basically to help you think more entrepreneurially. Uh-huh. And in that class was really where we were like, let's do this. Let's start this company. And our professor is still like one of our mentors and helps us a lot.
That's cool.
With ideas. Yeah.
It's good to have support like that. So where did you come up with the name?
Well, we were sitting in my old apartment in Harlem up by Columbia, and we were talking about how circuses are named in general, like often they're family names. Sometimes they'll be named after objects, like Cirque du Soleil's got the sun, for example, or Big Apple Circus had, the apple. Or they'll be named after a place. But one of the things that I hadn't seen before was circuses that are named after themes or ideas. I mean, it has happened, but they're less and less common. And Lindsay and I were trying to bounce around, like, what kind of themes and ideas appeal to us in a very big picture, broad sense as far as the kinds of shows and projects. And the idea of doing something which is why we like the word hideaway is because it's sort of got that feeling of it's an escape. You have to go to it. It's a place you're not always at. It's sometimes temporary. It's got a little bit of mystery to it. And we thought from a big picture themes that could really work for almost any of our projects. And it was nice and short. And a circus sounded good. And the website was available.
Everything lined up. The universe lined up for you.
Yeah, but we had, about, 50 words on his whiteboard, and would say them over and over and over, and until we got to Hideaway, and we were like,
well, Hidden Away was on the board for like 2 months before we realized we could just shorten it to Hideaway.
That's the clincher right there. Oh, I did it. That's cool. So what would you guys say, and Josh, I'm losing you in this shot again, what would you say the mission is for Hideaway?
The mission is to create really compelling live and virtual circus and theater entertainment, which is very broad. I think the most important thing for Hideaway is to create art and shows and experiences that come from Lyndsay and I and feature things and people and artists that we love and are products that we wish existed and wish we could see and attend. So we have to make them in order to do that.
Yeah, I think one thing that Josh and I were both really drawn to, and I think why we connected originally, was the idea of storytelling and more than just being presentational, which I think circus can sometimes just be very presentational, and it's wonderful to watch, but it loses maybe the story a bit. And the shows that I've seen where it really connects to the story or a theme, and you can really feel it, I really connect to, and that's what Josh and I hope to do with our shows as well.
Yeah. Both of us spent our entire childhoods and, early careers working in show business and seeing shows, and after doing that for years and years and years and going, okay, I like this thing that person does, I like this thing that company does, where you start to have your own personal tastes. Sure. It was just hard for us to not go, okay, we gotta make that into something.
Yeah, I get it. I heard you mention tented shows a few times, so it's important to you to have the tent involved at some point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think without doubt, and probably within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll have a tented show up and running. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we ran into, and I think is the current challenge for anybody working in tented circus, is that there's no middle ground. Either you can do a very, very small show where you seat, I'd say, less than 750, and ideally even less than that, where you have very, very low operating costs and you don't need to have a particularly big marketing budget in order to fill your house. Or you can go the opposite direction and have over 2,000 seats, where you have like Cavalia or Cirque du Soleil or a Big Apple. I think used to have just about 2,000 when they sold it out. Because if you live in the middle, which is what we were planning to do, to have 1,000 seats or 1,500 seats, you don't have enough seats to sell in order to make back your marketing budget. So in order to sell, or in order to have enough people see your ads and come to the show, you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing, but you only make that money back if you have enough seats or if you don't spend that much in marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to us to have a tented show because it is, arguably one of the most magical things when you walk into a circus tent.
Yeah.
And, I love seeing circus anywhere, but in a tent is like
the dream.
Yeah, the dream.
And it's classic. I think right now, and America's a particularly difficult country to do tented shows in, just geographically. If you look in places like France and Switzerland where they have the most tented shows, it's because they have towns that are all within 10 to 15 miles of one another and lots of open, flat land. Mm-hmm. And so you can do jumps pretty frequently in their short distances. While in the States, after coming to New York, the next place you could go, maybe it's Bridgeport, or maybe you go to New Haven, and that's quite a big jump. And even finding available land that's flat and clear within those downtown areas is quite difficult. Yeah. So just geographically, it's challenging to do. I think if we were to stay regionally, which is sort of our first plan, is to do it in the Northeast, it becomes a little bit more manageable. But to tour the U.S. nationally in a tent, you really need a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Well, you had a couple of really good guests recently. I've been listening to your most recent ones. I listened to the first few and the most recent ones. I still have a few in the middle to catch up on your podcast. Who's a guest that surprised you the most?
Salam.
Oh yeah, I knew that story so far. So yeah.
Yeah, well, Josh, Salam worked at Circus Smirkus as Josh's
my coach when I was like 15.
And I had met Salam when we went to Smirkus to see a show, but I didn't know anything about his story really. I just knew like the highlights and hits. And hearing his story of how he got into circus from someone who's not American and really grew up doing circus through shows, and didn't have a formal education and kind of made his way through being kind of great at everything, was really, really cool for me. And he surprised me a lot.
Yeah. I don't think I've been totally surprised in big picture by any guests, but almost every interview I feel surprised in a few ways with often with people's how they fall in love with circus or end up in the business. Those are always like my favorite parts of the interview, when I hear how somebody got hooked.
Yeah.
Is anybody particularly surprising? Salam is a good one. I mean, Gypsy Snyder, who we did early on, I thought had some really great, surprising insights, particularly about her early career, because most people, I think, just think of her from Seven Fingers onwards. Mm-hmm. And she's got an amazing life story, and a lot of those stories I hadn't heard. Right? She started in the Pickle family, exactly.
So, how did you guys get hooked on circus?
I saw Cirque du Soleil when I was 11. My neighbor brought me, who's now a circus dramaturg living in Belgium, even though we both grew up in Connecticut. I saw it, and then from that moment, I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it's been that way since I was 11. And I did Circus Smirkus, the camp, the following year, and then I did the tour. And that was the beginning of it for me.
I came into it later. I actually found out that I went to like every circus when I was little, and I have all of the programs because my parents took me, and I have like all the clown signatures.
Oh, wow.
I apparently was in love with circus when I was little, which I didn't know, which maybe explains why I love it now. But I got into it because, there was only 10 people in our Columbia program, and Josh and I hit it off right away. And he was like, I'm going to go see all these circus shows. And I was like, I'll go with you.
There you go.
And so I saw everything, and then I just like loved it. I just absolutely loved it.
And you sort of liked circus-y stuff without realizing it. Like when you'd watch So You Think You Can Dance,
Yeah.
you saw like all the acrobatic stuff.
Well, yeah,
there.
I showed Josh a dance piece from So You Think You Can Dance, and I was like, this is so cool. There's so many lifts, and it's beautiful. And he was like, that is beautiful. But let me show you a hand-to-hand act. He'll be like, whoa.
This is the real deal.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, you're right.
That's good. And Josh, what is your specialty in circus?
Well, when I haven't performed or even really gotten on the equipment in the last 4 years now, but when I was doing it full time, mostly straps. I did straps most recently, and then before that I would do Chinese pole, a little bit of teeterboard.
Okay. How about
But
you, Lyndsay?
short and stocky, so good for flipping.
I mean, I can do nothing. So, but Josh did
Lyndsay
take me
can
to a
sing really, really, really well. So not a typical circus skill.
No,
But
I mean, I was a performer and like musical theater performer, but not a circus performer. I did take a flying trapeze class, wasn't not very good at it.
I heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
I still mean to look that video up.
This is so embarrassing. It was so bad. But no, I
Okay.
can't juggle or anything.
Do you have
You-
any guests
you're-
that you're really looking forward to having on the show someday?
yes, I'm really excited to have this guy Brett Pfister on, who's going to be on in November. And Brett originally also got his start in Circus Smirkus, and then went to École Nationale de Cirque in Montreal, and then moved to London. And he he still does an aerial hoop act, but now he's doing a contortion comedy act as well. And Brett is one of the most insightful people I've ever met, and so incredibly funny. And I'm just excited to like have an opportunity to talk to him about his life in these settings. That's like one of the most fun things with the podcast is some of our guests I've known for like 5-10 years, and there's so much I realized after the podcast I like didn't even really know about them. And the excuse to interview my friends sometimes and be like, oh man, I didn't know you did that when you were 13, or like, oh, that's how you got that thing.
Yeah.
Is really neat.
I think one of our dream guests, though, is
yeah.
James Thierry. We really want to have him on. I think he's a genius, and I love the fact that he and his mom do almost all of the show. Like, he does directing, choreography,
His
lighting.
mom does, lighting. His mom does set and costumes.
Wow.
And it's kind of like what we're doing for Slumber, because we're just doing everything. So anytime I'm, like, overwhelmed, I'm like, James Thierry can do it. I can do it.
So do you have him scheduled yet?
No.
We don't.
Hopefully.
I'm waiting. He has a show that comes to BAM every other year, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So I'm hoping that next time he's in for that, which will probably be next summer. Hopefully, we'll be able to get him on.
Good. I'm glad that the podcast is going to just keep going as well as all your other projects.
That's the plan.
Okay, good.
I want to have 100 episodes, and then we can have a celebration.
You'll be there pretty soon. You're cranking them out.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I want to ask you is, do you have, guys, I know you've done theater and you've done circus, do you have any experience in audio or radio background?
I went to film school for my undergrad degree. When I was in high school, I was very torn between, do I apply to circus school and become a performer, or do I go to regular university? And I have no idea why I thought this. But at the time I was like, well, studying film producing and directing will be a lot like studying circus producing and directing. So during my undergrad, I spent a lot of time editing video and audio, which now happens to be helpful that I know how to use audio editing software.
Yeah.
It all comes in handy in the long run.
And exactly, long run it paid off. At the time, I was like, "This isn't helpful at all. This isn't gonna help me learn to direct circus."
Yeah.
But it's great for podcasting.
Okay, that's great. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, you've talked to people that are in more traditional circus, and obviously you guys like that too. You've spoken to contemporary people. Have you experienced any divisiveness about the different genres of circus in your travels through the interview world?
Do you mean like people who are negative about other kinds of circus?
Yes.
For the most part, in our podcast, we almost always edit it so that we tend to stay positive.
Mm-hmm.
There are like outtakes where we spend like 20 minutes getting really negative and we just don't include it.
I mean, I think it has been interesting to hear the different views of people who come from a traditional circus background and where they feel like contemporary circus is maybe losing some of the traditional things that drove contemporary circus to where it is now.
Yeah.
And like the whole overall idea of everyone's in it for the show and everyone is going to give everything they can to every aspect, not just the performing, has been an interesting topic that a lot of people bring up about the contemporary circus world as it is now. And like some performers seem to be more like
want to be treated as actors.
Yeah, and people from the traditional circus world feel like that's losing this like family idea of
the value that this.
Yeah.
Everybody helps, everybody pitches in, everybody does, moves things on and off stage, rigs their own equipment. While, in New York, if you're an actor, like you just go on stage and do your thing, and there's teams of people who do the other things.
Right.
And I've heard that from people who are doing contemporary shows as well. Like they also feel like that's something that has been lost a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think
it's also, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. It's also very much generational. I think when we talk to people, like there's 3 very, very clear, distinct generations of circus performers. Which is the sort of, I'd say, Big Apple, early Circus Flora, when they were coming up basically in the late 80s, early 90s as a generation. People coming up in the early 2000s as a generation. People coming up in the 2010s or however you describe that is another generation. And they all seem to have very different sort of worldviews on circus.
But I mean, it is the same as when you talk to theater people, like there's those people that are like the old golden age musicals. That's what musical theater is. And these contemporary musicals don't have that. They're not what they should be. Yeah. So I think it's like just like what you're used to, and then watching it change can be sad.
Yeah.
And I do think that there are values of the traditional circus that I hope that we can instill in the shows that we do. So it's been good for us to hear everyone's opinions, because I'm like, oh yeah, that is true. Like that is gone, or that is something that we want to put into our contemporary circus show. That is missing.
Yeah, but also people are nostalgic. Also, one of the reasons why the Salam interview is one of our favorite ones is because Salam is both nostalgic for doing circus in the 70s and 80s in tents that travel all over Europe, but he also talks about like the racism and sexism in those cultures that doesn't really, or is less prevalent now.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy to remember, how great everything was, and then sometimes our guests will be like, yeah, I mean, aspects of it were really great. Right. But also, like, the reason we were putting up the tent was because we were black and the white performers didn't have to do that. There's that's what's great about the podcast. We can talk about it for an hour and really get into it and sort of like learn the details of these stories.
Yeah. Cool. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about your new show. I know a little bit about it. I've been reading about it, but give us, for the audience, tell us about Slumber.
Okay. You can give the
overview, the elevator pitch. So it's a new circus dance show opening in Brooklyn at the House of Yes, October 6th, running through November 6th. It has a cast of 7, 6 women, 1 guy. It's
which I would like to point out, because most shows right now are a lot of men.
I know, I was impressed by that. Like, yes, okay.
And the premise behind it is that these 7 girls are best friends, and tonight they're going out to the club, the House of Yes, to party, and one of them goes crazy and kills everybody else. So
in a hilarious way.
The show's really funny. The psycho killer is hysterical and super talented. And it's choreographed by Keone and Mari Madrid, who are not very well known in the circus world, but in the dance world, they're pretty big names. Most people I think will have seen them in Justin Bieber's "Love Yourself" video. I say most people because it has 900 million YouTube views. So it's you've seen it.
It's crazy, and they've been nominated for an MTV award, and so they're pretty awesome. And I still am pinching myself that they're on our team.
So it's a lot of their style of movement and style of choreography, and our cast has 3 dancers who are specifically dancers who can really, really do their style. And then we have 4 really, really amazing circus performers who do more than one discipline, but are some of the best in the world, best we've ever worked with.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about Keone and Mari. Was it necessary to separate the choreography from the circus, or were you able to blend it together? Because I noticed when I saw Pippin, and one of your performers is in Pippin, that they did try to blend it. I know that Gypsy Snyder tried to blend it a lot, but it was kind of obvious that who was the circus performers doing circus and who was the actors doing a little teeny bit of circus, and that's kind of an issue when it comes to adding theatricality to circus.
Yes, I think one of the things about Keone Mari's dancing is that it is, I actually think, very much like a circus act. It is so technically difficult and precise that it has a real trick quality to it in a way that I think other styles of dance, Pippin's a good example of that. Who was the original choreographer on Pippin?
Bob Fosse.
Bob Fosse. It's very much like a Broadway style of dance, while Keone and Mari's style to me is actually very tricky kind of feeling in the way that circus is kind of tricky based.
Yeah, I think we're using the dancers as I would say equals to the circus performers, and they have their own act essentially. Whereas I would say with Pippin, it was definitely the performers and the circus performers were the chorus, which I also feel added to the divide of the show, because it's very clear who could sing and who was a character, named character, and who was the ensemble, and they were mostly the circus performers. Whereas this show, it's really a true ensemble show, and their dancing is part of the act.
Yeah, we treat the dance numbers like they are circus acts. If you were to imagine a circus show which has act,
which I've never seen, so I think it'll be really cool and work. We'll see, but I've never seen a dance and circus show that are equal.
That'll be interesting, yeah. And I was going to ask, how do you classify it, because it's got a slasher whodunit kind of feel. It's a musical, it's circus, it's dance.
I know.
Yeah.
Is it all of the above?
It's a big challenge. It's not a musical. There's no singing per se, but
But there is a score.
There's a score.
Okay.
So in that sense, it's musical, and because the choreography is very much part of it, it is a very musical show. But yes, describing it is one of the biggest challenges we have come across, and we are banking on that when we have photo and video, that we will not need too much text to describe it.
I think it's, it started really as a circus show.
Yeah.
And once we started working with Keone and Mari and seeing how much their dance is part of it, then it became also a dance show and theater show. And so it's everything. But it's a circus show to start.
I think
it started with circus.
The problem, I think if you are a circus person and you see a lot of circus, it would be very easy to say, yeah, it's circus. It's just it's a new circus. It's exactly what you'd expect, because the comedy aspect fits in the same way the clown aspect does. The dancing we're treating as though it's sort of like circus performers and circus acts. But you say to a public who's not educated about circus, oh, it's just a circus show, I think that doesn't really represent it, because people will think maybe it has animals. They don't necessarily think that there's going to be sort of a stand-up comedy talking style of comedy. Right. So I think if you are very well informed about circus, describing it as circus is probably enough. But if you're the kind of person who just thinks circus is ringling, then we sort of need those other words to give you a bit more of the flavor.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the idea now. So, Lyndsay, what's the best thing about working with Josh?
There's not a lot.
Oh, there's so much. I think the best thing about working with Josh is that Josh is a very strong person and a very confident person. And I think as a woman and as just me as a person, I tend to downplay either my opinion or my confidence. And working with someone who is so confident and so outward in their opinions and strong has really made me feel like a much stronger person. And I think that's what you want in your partner, to make you feel like I can conquer anything. Mm-hmm. And I think as women also, like in leadership roles, it's like a strange, like dichotomy of like being too bossy, right. Or too, right. Yeah. And so I think being with someone who doesn't care about that double standard has made me feel like very, very secure in like myself and my ideas and my opinions, and
good
leading
relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about you? What would you say about Lyndsay?
I was trying to think of a good answer that whole time she was talking. The first thing that came to mind, and I think is the most true, is that Lyndsay can literally do anything. Like, I've never met somebody who has such a wide range of skills, which she's incredibly good at. Like, she's doing costume design, where not only did she pick the costume, she's also painting on them. She's also amazing at reading legal contracts. She's also amazing at singing, amazing at doing all of the administrative stuff, and then also immediately flipping over and doing all of the artistic stuff, booking the venue, and then designing the set for the venue. Like, my skills are pretty limited. I'm just here along for the ride. But I think Lyndsay has really taught me, has given me the attitude of not to be afraid of trying to do things you don't really know super well, because you might be really good at them. Because I see Lyndsay do something she's never done before and crush it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can take a little bit of that attitude.
Does it work when you do it?
Yeah, it doesn't work as well on my first
No, it works.
But Lyndsay first pass at something usually comes out like pretty perfect.
Yeah.
It makes for a really great partner. But we're partners in so many aspects of our lives that it's hard even for us to sort of separate any aspect out, like saying it's just a working relationship, because we're also engaged, we also live together. We're planning a wedding together. We have other shows together. We have a dog. We have plants. We have a cat. Like, there's all these different things that we manage as a team. Mm-hmm. Which now, I was talking about to Lyndsay last night, now seems a little bit unusual. But had you taken a look at circus like 100 years ago, or even just generally family businesses 100 years ago, it wouldn't have been so odd for a couple to be doing everything and splitting the work the way we're doing it now. And it's awesome. I really wouldn't want to do it any other way.
Yeah, nothing like a project to bring you closer together. I mean, and there's also those fights, but we won't talk about those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great. No, I'm glad I got to talk to you. I hope that maybe sometime during the rehearsal, maybe we could, if you get Skype where you rehearse, maybe we could do like a quick run through with the cast and do like a video interview with them.
That'd be cool. That'd be fun.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
We can just set that up.
Yeah, we'll send you, Matt and us have our schedule, and we can sort of take a look at it and see when we have everybody in the same room, and or if you want to talk to specific people, which people.
Okay, so it's been really great talking to you. Thank you so much for doing the interview, and I wish you all success with Slumber. I won't be able to see it in New York, but I promise I'll come see it when it comes closer to me.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us on. I love reading you in Spectacle and on Circus Promoters and now Hup, so keep going.
Thank you very much. All right, guys, have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.